how's it going? Today I want to discuss a crime that happened back in 1986. This is the murder of Sherri Rasmussen. We are going to discuss the background of the case today. We're going to discuss the perpetrator, Stephanie Lazarus, and just what kind of a person she was. Just the whole story sucks. So, there has been a recent update on this, and that's kind of what brought me back into it. So let's get on into it. I have some feelings about Stephanie Lazarus, and if you're anything like me, you will too. She seemingly had a pretty normal childhood. She grew up in Simi Valley, California, and stories from her family just indicated it was just a normal life. Stephanie ended up going to the University of California in Los Angeles, so UCLA, and she started there in 1978, graduating in 1982. Stephanie took a lot of big roles in the sports area. She was always hanging around all of the other jocks and everything. She was really active and she just seemed pretty bubbly and happy to a lot of people. More like just a fun person to be around. Maybe a little bit extra. I think some people would probably describe her as such, but overall, just seemed like another kind girl. While in college, Stephanie lived in Dykstra Hall. That was a dorm for like more of the jockey kids. She was in the junior varsity basketball team and she was going for a degree in political science. So very ambitious. I think she seemed like she really just wanted to change the world. Now, as she was attending UCLA, she actually met another man that was on the basketball team. His name was John Rutan. And oh man, it was like almost the way it was described is that when Stephanie met him, bells went off, the birds were singing. She just fell for him so hard. And I think John knew it. He's described, okay, listen, now in trying to be respectful, I've seen a lot of different people do the stories on everything that happened, and a lot of the times they kind of make John to seem to be just a normal guy and everything. But after I did a lot of research on this case, I found a lot of accounts of John being a playboy, just living life, and good for him. But it almost seems like there was a point where he didn't realize where he went from having fun and everybody enjoying themselves to kind of stringing people along. And I kind of feel like if he had been able to learn those boundaries, maybe there could have been a different outcome in this story. But regardless, Stephanie and John they grew to be very close. John and Stephanie were so close that like they met each other's families. They would go out on vacations together. I saw stories of them visiting Hawaii like multiple times. And I don't know, John always puts it out to where like his relationship with Stephanie was always platonic, but they would get physical. So kind of like what we would describe today to be as like friends with benefits, and that he was perfectly clear to her about it. But there was something lost in translation, and Stephanie hasn't really come out to discuss it much. There is an interview where she does say that it was more of a friend situation.
What year is it now? 2009? I graduated in 82. 82, yeah. We dated. I dated other guys. I'm sure he dated other girls.
Well, let me ask you, roughly how long would you say you guys dated?
Oh, jeez. Um, I couldn't even say. I mean, I started school there in 78. I started UCLA in 1978. I graduated in 82. I don't even remember what year he graduated, if it was a year or two before me.
Okay.
I think he was a little bit older.
I mean, I know if somebody that I had relations with was taking me to Hawaii, or if I was going like abroad with them, or whatever the situation may be, if I was attending time with the family, I mean, they even went to San Diego to visit his family at one point. So to me, that definitely says more than just friends, but you know, it is what it is. I mean, they continued on like this for 4 years. It seemed like everybody was enjoying themselves. Now, when college ended, surprisingly to some of her friends, Stephanie actually joined the police academy, and she went and she was able to become an officer. And at the same time, John was striking out. He got a job of his own and he was working his way up through the ladder. I think he had gone to school to be a mechanical engineer. So, looking to really make good lives for themselves and have a positive impact. And it would have been really nice if it could have gone that way, but I mean, we're talking about it today, so I mean, it obviously didn't, right? John and Stephanie continued like this until 1984. I mean, maybe a little bit after that too, let's be honest. But in 1984, John actually met the woman that he would go on to marry, Sherri Rasmussen. And Sherri was just, oh, she was wonderful. So they had been set up on like they've been set up by friends. The friends were throwing a party and they knew John, they knew Sherri, and they thought that it would be a really good match. And, it seemed that they were right. John ended up falling for Sherri, and I, it was 8 months. That's all it took, 8 months for him to realize that that was the woman that he wanted to marry. So John proposed to her and she accepted. Now, Stephanie, when she found this out, she was absolutely devastated. Okay, I saw some reports that said that she had found out from a friend and then she had called John. I saw other reports saying that when she had thrown a birthday party, Stephanie threw the 25th birthday party for John. So, I mean, again, interesting to that's like girlfriend behavior, you know what I mean? They're displaying girlfriend boyfriend behavior this whole time. Meanwhile, John's still playing the field, and he falls in love with Sherri, and when Stephanie found out, she was devastated. And I think anybody could relate to that, especially if it seemed like one thing to you and it turned out to be something else, and just being blindsided that hard, it must have been difficult. I mean, I will at least give her that. That must have been difficult, but it's also a sign that he's just not that into you. I don't know. To me, that's insulting, and it's like, well, maybe I thought that you were husband material before, but no, bye. But Stephanie didn't have that feeling. Instead, Stephanie just lost it. Okay, it was like she was hit with all of the 5 stages of grief just at once, going all through, with the exception of acceptance, because I don't think Stephanie accepted John was marrying Sherri at all. Stephanie actually invited John to come over to her house. That way, she could let him know how much she loved him, get all her cards out on the table so that he would know. I'm sure there was a part of her that was just so hopeful, that just, wanted to think maybe he thought that she wasn't into him, and maybe all he needed to know was that Stephanie really loved him in order to see. But again, here we go into mixed signals, because while John was there, Stephanie begged him to stay with her and then asked him for sex. And John, while this fucking guy is like engaged to Sherri already, trying to make sure that things are completely clear with Stephanie, supposedly clear, you know what I mean? He ends up having sex with her. Why? I just, it doesn't make sense. And it's so shitty. I, Sherri deserved so much more. She had such high ambition in life. I mean, she graduated high school at the age of 16, and she ended up going to UCLA too, funny enough. And she ended up getting a degree in nursing, and she was working at the hospital. She was in a position of authority over the other nurses, and she really just wanted to improve healthcare overall for everyone. Let's go back to, how John went over to Stephanie's house and he ended up having sex with her after he was already engaged with Sherri. Okay, do you think that helped? John, do you think that actually helped to make her understand the separation? No, it didn't. All that this did was it empowered Stephanie. She felt like hot shit and it gave her that hope that she needed. She was bargaining with the universe to hope that she could change things for John because, at this point, now she's thinking, well, yeah, he actually does want me, of course, but, he just needs to see past and we need Sherri to go. There actually is even a report of when Stephanie first actually laid eyes on Sherri, her going home to her roommate and telling him about how ugly she found Sherri. It was real jealous behavior, just not becoming of really anyone. And it's unfortunate that, this whole rivalry and situation could have been avoided with better boundaries, but, you know, things happen. Stephanie felt empowered. She took all of the anger that she had from the whole situation, mixed in with all of the empowerment she got from begging John that night and how he gave in and, got intimate with her and everything. So she dressed up. Oh my God. Oh, this is so gross to think about. Ugh. It's described the outfit that she chose to wear when she decided to go and confront Sherri is just ridiculous. So she wears a crop top and like the Daisy Duke shorts, she's like feeling herself. She's like, "Oh yeah, look at me. I am so hot. I'm going to be going there. Sherri's going to get the clue." And I'm sure in her mind she thought, with Sherri gone, John and I can go and get married and, live our lives. So Stephanie goes down to Sherri's job at the hospital and she confronts her wearing the ridiculous outfit that she had, just showing all of her skin, getting into an argument. She's telling Sherri that, John's mine. If I can't have John, no one will. And then to top it all off, Stephanie told Sherri that her and John had sex 2 nights before. So Sherri obviously is very upset about this. She leaves early from work, she goes home. There ends up being a whole, of course, discussion with her and John about the situation and about Stephanie. And John just is kind of like, "Well, I didn't know what to do. What am I supposed to do?" And it's like, John, you're supposed to tell her to go fuck herself, okay? John, you're not supposed to have sex with her. Okay? You're just making things worse. But Sherri forgave him. I mean, I don't know. She, like her dad, Nels, he comes in a little bit later on in the story, Nels Rasmussen. He did not like John. The vibes were fucked. He knew it. He wasn't into it. But he knew how much Sherri loved John, so, he didn't speak up maybe as much. When you go and you look and you see the things that he said later on, and you kind of see this regret that, he kind of wished that he would have gone back and he could have gone back and said something to Sherri, been a little bit more forceful with his feelings, but he didn't. But he sure did later on. We'll get there though. I love that guy, and I feel so much for him. Him and Sherry's whole family, but just Nels took a front and center role in trying to help figure out who did what to his daughter. I mean, he knew, but proving it in the court of law and whatever, but we'll get there. So Sherry ends up forgiving John, and they go and they get married at the end of 1985, and Stephanie just loses it. There are stories about how deep her depression went. So she would cry to her roommate about, what happened, how he left her, how could he do this? And of course, the digs at Sherry, she's not even pretty. I don't understand. But then she also was like writing letters to John's mom, confessing how much she loved John and how much she really wishes that things could be different. She ended up taking leave off of work because she just couldn't focus. She couldn't concentrate. I mean, she was heartbroken. And I get it, but I don't know. John wasn't even a prize to begin with, let's be honest, okay? Because anybody who's going to sleep around like that on somebody who he's asking to spend the rest of their life with him is just, it's not worth it, Like, pick better people, put up better boundaries, just toxic. It just feels toxic. Now, even with John and Sherry getting married, Stephanie didn't quit, okay? Now listen, she was a police officer, okay? She had already been a police officer for 2 years at this point. And I don't know. I think somewhere along the line, she must have gotten a copy of a key to their condo or learned how to pick locks really well. Uh, and she would start just showing up at their place. So Stephanie would let herself in and sit there and wait for John. And, there was one time reported where Sherry had actually answered the door to Stephanie, told Stephanie to leave her alone, leave John alone, don't come back. And she slammed the door in Stephanie's face. And I mean, Stephanie must have taken this hard. And the whole time, Sherry is pleading to John, please tell her to leave us alone. And John, just having no fucking spine at this time, didn't do what he was supposed to do. He still wanted to insist that Stephanie was just a really good friend. And it's like, no, absolutely not. She was like his little side piece. And I bet, they probably would have ended up having an affair at some point, but they never really had the chance to, I mean, unless you count sleeping with her after they're engaged, but whatever, Of course, can you imagine somebody abusing their position as a police officer? No. But Sherry actually fell victim to Stephanie doing exactly that. So sometimes, like I had said, she was showing up at their place unannounced, just letting herself in. She would do it in her police uniform sometimes too. She was basically stalking Sherry and just trying to scare her, doing everything that she could. And, Sherry doesn't want to leave. She's already built a really good position up for her at the hospital, and she's been there, and she shouldn't have to move. It got so bad to the point that Sherry actually confided in her dad, Nels, because they talked all the time on the phone. So Sherry told him how scared she was and how John wasn't going to do anything. She felt like, you know, just hopeless at that point. And I had seen another point where Nels had discussed the whole case and some of the last times he had spoken with his daughter. And one of the last conversations they had, she had told her dad that John had 2 weeks to get it solved or things were going to have to be put in motion. And, her dad said, okay, check in with me in 2 weeks. But the 2 weeks never ended up being able to actually get there. Sherry and John were only married for 3 months. It all ended on February 24th of 1986. Sherry wasn't feeling very well that day, so She had recently had a back injury and she had like this, I don't know, this boring class thing at work. And, just between all of that, she decided to call out that day. So John, he didn't have a problem. He ended up getting ready and going out to work. He left the condo at 7:20 in the morning and said goodbye to Sherri and went to work as normal. He would call a couple of times throughout the day, trying to check in on Sherri, see if she's doing any better. And like, remember, we're talking about the 80s. So while nowadays everybody has a cell phone, back then it was landlines. So, and I don't even know if you knew half the time who was calling. You had like an answering machine. Sometimes it was like this huge phone with an answering machine attached. And it wasn't as easy to get a hold of somebody if you were trying to check up on them at the time. So, with her not answering the house phone, John just figured, oh, well, maybe she ended up feeling better and she ended up going to work. So, he starts calling her work and trying to find out, hey, where's Sherri? She never answered at work. So, he spent the day doing that. Kind of had a little bit of an uneasy feeling, but I bet he was probably just hoping maybe she just fell asleep. While I don't like the actions that John took, I do think it's possible that, you know, I think it's possible that he had some type of love for her. I'm judgy. Okay, I don't think his love was as pure for her as he tries to portray later on, because why would he have had sex with Stephanie? Sorry, I'm just stuck on that. Okay, he was engaged, so like, what the fuck, stringing her along and trying to move on. How did he think it would end up all right? So that bad feeling in his gut, that I mean, he should have heated it a little bit better, even, because things did not go well that day. John got home around 6 p.m. And when he arrived back at his and Sherri's home, he saw signs of a struggle and it was just a mess. There were two like stereo things by the door. So, okay, that's the other thing. The stereos were really big back then. They were like boxes, I don't know. Ugh. Everything's all digital now. We stream everything. So I don't really know how to explain it for the people who don't know, but for those who know, like, okay? They were big, they were bulky, and people would take them from houses. They would burglarize homes to take it, and they were put by the door, and it almost looked like somebody, may have been trying to burglarize, if that was all you saw. But when you look at the rest of the house and you find out a little bit more, we're going to get into what was taken. You're going to have some questions, because I know I did. And it seems like everybody else who was in it for Sherri, they had some questions. So there was broken stuff all over the place. It was just a mess. And in the middle of all this mess is Sherri. She's in a pool of blood. She's really messed up. The autopsy of Sherri actually showed that she had 3 bullet wounds. She had numerous abrasions and lacerations on her face, on her arms, and then there was a bite mark on her arm. Now, the most important thing is that bite mark. Okay, that bite mark told a story along with everything else. And what that bite mark said is it said that at some point, Sherri was able to get the assailant in a headlock, because that bite was not there prior to John leaving to work. So when Sherri had that assailant in a headlock, it seems in order to break free, that's when the assailant bit her and then seemingly shot her shortly after that, right in center mass. Who's trained to shoot his center mass, I wonder? Meh, probably nothing. Now remember, we're talking about 1986, okay? So in 1986, there wasn't the DNA technology like we have nowadays, but the coroner very smartly actually ended up swabbing the bite to gather DNA. And I mean, this, along with all the trace evidence they had around the whole apartment, I mean, it added up to having quite a bit of evidence just not fully the ability to do everything they needed to with it yet, but it was still gathered. And, the police, upon looking at the scene and everything, they came up with a theory. Okay. So they're thinking they're going to figure it all out, they're going to solve it. And their theory was, of course, that it was two Latino men trying to burglarize. Yes, yes, that's right. The LAPD decided that this scene must have been two Latino men. Okay, because obviously it was a burglary gone wrong. There were two little pieces of, well, two big pieces of stereo equipment right by the door that they were trying to take. What else was taken, you wonder? Well, Sherri's BMW was taken, and I mean, it was later found, just like found whole. Like it wasn't missing any of the pieces, it hadn't been stripped, but who's to say that means anything? Oh, there was one other thing that was missing. In Sherri's purse, she had had a copy of her marriage certificate because, she was going around doing the things that you have to do as a newlywed. I think specifically that day she was going to go and open a bank account, like a joint bank account for her and John. I think that's what I saw reported. But the marriage certificate was missing, and that was it. Nels, though, and basically everybody else who looked beyond and knew Sherri, they all had a different theory, and they all thought that it was actually Stephanie Lazarus, or, not everybody knew who she was, what her name was. I'm sure some of the employees at the hospital knew because she was a police officer, and, they kind of work together sometimes. And with Stephanie stalking her and showing up at work, it was out there, but, everybody knew it was her except the police officers. That's so weird, right? Um, but Nels fought, everybody really tried their best. Even in 1993, Sherri's family offered to pay for some DNA testing because there had been some leaps and bounds, maybe they could find out a little bit more identifying information from it. Not as good as today, and not as good as when they finally solved the case, but advancements had been made. And of course, they want justice for Sherri. But they were denied that. Oh, and the other thing, all of that trace evidence that had been found, and had been stored. Funny thing is, it really ended up going missing mostly around the time that the family wanted to pay for DNA testing. So there was a certain detective that had signed out the different pieces of evidence from the Sherri Rasmussen crime. And yeah, I mean, it went missing. So I guess things happen. How do all of these things happen, though? I hear you wondering, just like I was. Well, back then, the LAPD was just fucked. Okay? There's no way around it. They were. They were actually led by a chief of police that was so corrupt. I don't know how more of them didn't end up in jail. Daryl Gates was the chief of police from 1978 to 1992. And in this time, he cultivated this real heavy police superiority almost in the whole department. So it was a wild time, and it wasn't just them. The NYPD, too, had their own kind of version of this. They called theirs the thin blue line, and basically what that meant was that everybody behind that thin blue line should be protected. You protect your fellow officer if they've done some kind of crime. You help hide and cover up their crimes. I didn't know that that was exactly where the phrase the thin blue line came from, but interesting to know. Anyway, in the LAPD, they called theirs the big blue wall. So any kind of crimes that the police officers or the detectives were making at that time, there was a concerted effort to hide the crimes because the police, had to be above everybody else. And Stephanie just so happened to fall behind that wall. Okay? So while I don't know that there has been any actual arrests made, this all is really the explanation that most people give when they start discussing how could this have happened? How could Sherri's murder have gone unsolved for so long when it seemed so obvious? But regardless, at least it got solved at some point. So, there ended up being that sample that the coroner saved that did not fall within the pieces of evidence that went missing, but really nobody kind of really knew about it. It was just one that they didn't think of. The police didn't gather it themselves, the coroner did. So, I guess different routes of handling. So instead of upholding their oath to protect and serve, the officers ended up just really protecting Stephanie. Nels even tried to advocate that it was Stephanie that did it, and he was told that he had been watching too much TV. Isn't that wonderful? But I mean, at least he got redemption later on, right? Now, as the years go by, John, he ends up dealing with it however he deals with it. He had moved away from the area, and that was probably a good decision for him, except he still kept in contact with Stephanie. Why? Why did he do this? That's just a weird decision to make. If the wife that you loved so much was murdered, why would you want to hang around the person that had threatened to kill them in the few months leading up to her murder? I don't know, man. Choices are made every day, and this was just one that I don't get, man. But John and Stephanie actually ended up getting together again about 3 years after Sherri had been murdered. They're reported to have gotten together again. They went to Hawaii together, but they were still just friends, but friends that shared a bed. So, I mean, I don't know. That's a weird choice. So, I don't know, I was thinking about it, and, according to what John says later on, he's saying, it never crossed his mind that Stephanie could have been the one to do this. And I don't know. I wonder if he's either more fucked up than, we think, or just, really dumb. I mean, seriously, that's just I don't understand. I want to understand, but it's not happening, okay? It's not happening without kind of a mean explanation, so. Surprisingly, Stephanie and John did not end up getting married. They ended up separating ways, and over the years, John ended up getting married to someone else, and he had kids. There's not really much information about them out there, and good for them. The wife and kids are innocent, so I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'd probably be pretty upset hearing the details of this story, knowing that I was married to the guy anyway. So, you know, didn't really even try to find more out about them. Stephanie actually ended up marrying another detective on the LAPD, and but okay, the year that she had been caught, it almost seems like she finally had gotten comfortable enough to move on, and she was married to her husband, and they ended up adopting a little girl. That's sad. That's sad for that little girl, but it's part of me is really glad that Stephanie didn't get to really see her grow up, just because I feel like she wasn't owed that. And that little girl deserved a better mother, because that jealousy is poisonous. It's dangerous, Things like the murder of Sherri Rasmussen happens when you see the type of toxic jealousy that just permeated everything about how Stephanie chose to live her young adult life. Now, through all of this, Stephanie continued her career with the LAPD, believe it or not. I found that really interesting. And I mean, she participated in a lot of things. The chief of police at the time, he actually is the one that created the DARE program, and Stephanie was a big part of the DARE program, like when it was conceptualized and like just participating in it in the area. And then she even went on to be an officer in the jurisdiction that Sherri had been murdered at. So, I mean, like, I wonder what it was like when she would get a call, like, at or near the address where she killed Sherri at. Just, I hope that it was really uncomfortable for her. Although I kind of feel like, I don't know, she's kind of sociopathic, right? So does that kind of stuff even bother people like that? I don't think it does, but remember that DNA swab that was taken from the bite mark on Sherri's arm? Well, in the 2000s, they were able to actually look into the DNA. They took that swab that the coroner had taken from it and they were able to test it. And when they tested the DNA, much to their surprise, the DNA did not match a male. Just like the LAPD had said, the Latino males must have murdered her. No, the DNA matched a woman. And it's really not that common where like women do burglaries like that. But it just kind of broke the whole story that the LAPD was trying to say. And I mean, by this time, you're looking at a cold case, okay? So it had been moved to a whole complete different unit. There were new detectives on the case and they were reviewing everything and seeing that the DNA from the swab on her arm was a woman's DNA really changed the minds because these are cold case detectives. They were not on the original case. They're brand new to it. So I mean, they might have even gone in knowing nothing, and just getting that very little summary that's from the LAPD on there. So, they're feeling around trying to see what exactly is going on here. They're looking at everything from a bird's eye point of view, which sometimes can help you solve the puzzle. Now, as the detectives are looking over the case, these cold case detectives, they just get it. They're looking over everything. They know that the DNA is from a woman and not a man. So the original story from the LAPD cannot be true. So what they end up doing is they're combing through the file. They're trying to see what women knew John, what women knew Sherri, and was there anybody out there to get Sherri? Because it kind of seems that way, right? So they see mention of S. Lazarus. Now, they thought that they knew an officer by this name, and actually, in April of 2009, Stephanie was featured with the original, like, art theft department. There was like a special division within the LAPD that worked after art theft, and they had a big spread of them in one of the local newspapers, and Stephanie was in it. So her name was, I mean, it was kind of on their mind. So they're wondering if that's the same person. They look it up and they see, well, yeah, she was on the force that long ago because it's noted in the file that she was an officer. So as they see this, I'm sure their hearts sunk because now they're going after one of their own, which really has to be incredibly uncomfortable. And they also have to keep this down low. Stephanie's been with the LAPD for so long. They don't know who's going to say what, and they need to blindside her with this. They had already determined that. They knew that this had to be something that she had no clue about. So it was really kept on the down low. It almost seemed like it was just the detectives, the partners that were working on it, and their boss that knew about the whole investigation. So they have that DNA sample and what they need to do to confirm that Stephanie was the one that bit Sherri, therefore was the one that murdered Sherri, or that Stephanie was not the one that bit Sherri and was not the one that murdered Sherri. They needed to obtain a piece of Stephanie's DNA. So what do? They trail Stephanie around as she's, off duty. She's running errands, and she leaves behind a styrofoam cup in the trash. Okay. So they take that styrofoam cup. Instead of waiting and going through the proper chain of evidence, I'm sure with the approval of their supervisor, they just went straight to the testing lab. And within 24 hours, they were able to see that the DNA was a match. Stephanie Lazarus had to have been the person that murdered Sherri Rasmussen. It was Stephanie Lazarus's DNA in the bite wound on Stephanie's arm. June 5th of 2009 is when her infamous interrogation happens. And the tape of the whole thing is out there, and I'm telling you, if you want to see like the most cartoonish ass looking disaster of an interrogation, it's worth a watch. I definitely enjoyed myself watching it. So she looks so uncomfortable, and I love that for her. Okay, can we all agree on this? I think she deserved it.
I'm looking at the notes, and these people are kind of, they're pointing the finger at you.
Well,
And
I mean, that's not ringing a bell to me, so, I don't know, it's, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that just sounds crazy to me.
yeah, so you, offhand, you don't recall ever going into her house and having words and physically,
No.
attacking her attacking you?
No.
Nothing like that?
No, I mean, no.
Nothing?
No, not at all.
So they had decided for this interview of Stephanie, they had to get her without her weapon. And one of the ways to do that was to go into an interrogation room, which really is the most appropriate if you think about it. So they come up with a story. They say, hey, Stephanie, we have a suspect that we want to talk to. It's about an art situation. Can you come into the interrogation room? Can we discuss this? So they get her in there, and there's like, I don't know, there must be like a camera on their lap or something, because they're sitting there and they start discussing, they start with small talk with Stephanie about, the art thefts and everything. And then they slowly, once they feel like she's, comfortable and her guard is down and everything, they bring up John. Okay. And you can see like right away, she's uncomfortable, but she's trying to portray like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. She like stumbles her way through the interview, just like, I don't know. I don't think I remember. And then she's like spilling all the details later on. Just awful. She does an awful job. She's so uncomfortable. Grab some popcorn, and, if you want to laugh about it, I'm there with you. Okay. Because, yeah. Stephanie had still thought that she was being protected by that big blue wall, but eventually it clicked. And by the time it clicked for her and she knew what was happening, it was too late. She left the interview room just to be arrested right outside of the door. And
I just can't even believe it. I mean, it's just, I'm shocked. I'm really shocked that somebody would be saying that I did this. I mean, we had a fight, and so I went and killed her. I mean, come on.
Well,
that's...
Okay. All right.
Well, thanks for giving me the courtesy. I wish I tape recorded.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Stephanie, take care.
All right.
This is absolutely crazy.
Have a seat, Stephanie.
This is insane.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. Stephanie, you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand?
Yes,
Anything you say may be used against you in court. Do you understand?
yes,
You have the right to the presence of an attorney before and during any questioning. Do you understand?
yes.
If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you free of charge before any questioning if you want. Do you understand?
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us right now?
No.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
This
then.
is crazy.
Okay.
This is absolutely... I'm like in shock. I'm totally in shock.
I loved that. I love that for everybody. A good deed happened at that time, and they bring her back into the interrogation room, and she knows it's up. And, at that point, it's like, we're going to trial, lawyers involved, all of that. But what an excellent interview. They did a good job filming that and putting it out so that we all could watch it. So now Stephanie got incredibly lucky, right? Can we all agree? Stephanie was very lucky for at least 2 decades there. And I mean, even after getting arrested, her luck continued because she was able to actually retire and take whatever retirement benefits that she had earned over the years with the department. Now, Stephanie ended up going to trial in 2012, okay? And the argument from her defense attorney was that the DNA must have been corrupted. So there's no way it could have actually been Stephanie. And then also, because Stephanie and John never ended up marrying, there was no way she wouldn't have done this. But then, there's all the other evidence, so I don't know how they thought that was a good defense, but I guess a star for effort? No A. You don't get an A for effort on that one. That was, ugh. And so anyway, the jury takes about 8 hours over 3 days to find Stephanie Lazarus guilty. Yay! I love that. I love that. Stephanie was finally found guilty. She was finally being put away. They were getting, justice. The family could feel a little bit better, maybe a little bit of closure to be able to understand and know, yes, she's guilty. For sure, I was right. I bet that felt really good to get rid of all those years they were being gaslit by the LAPD anyway, and just given the runaround. So I am so happy that happened for them. I mean, okay, John spoke also, and he was really tearful during the trial and everything. We've already discussed what bothers me about him and why was he having so much sex with Stephanie? Okay, why would you do that? Especially after she threatened to murder your wife who ended up getting murdered. It doesn't compute. If somebody can please explain that to me, maybe I'd understand better, but no way. Absolutely no way. Now, when Stephanie ended up getting sentenced, she ended up getting sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. She ended up going straight away to prison. There's the whole appeals process and all of that, and didn't work out. It stuck. Except I saw an update on this case. Okay? Stephanie was supposed to be eligible for parole in 2039. Okay? That's what? It's 2023, 16 years from now? 16 years from now. She should be behind bars for at least another 16 years. And I mean, she literally stole Sherri's life and then went on to live like nothing else was wrong. She was with the LAPD after having murdered another person. And I mean, the whole thing is gross. And she was protected. That's gross. It's just a failure all around. But what stings even more is that on November 16th of 2023, Stephanie went in front of a parole board in California, and guess what? She was recommended for parole. Yes. Yeah, that's right. Stephanie Lazarus was recommended for parole. She could be out in 2024. Why? I don't know. Because what happened to 2039, the whole family too, Nels, Sherri's dad, Sherri's mom, her siblings, they were all there. It was like they did a Zoom trial not trial. They did a Zoom parole hearing for her, and their family was there, and, John was there and all of that, and they still recommended. So it's not 100% yet if she's going to actually get parole. There's still another 2 steps that needs to happen. So that first hearing on November 16th of this year, 2023, where they recommended her for parole, that's happened. The next step is the California State Parole Board. They have to hear it, and they also have to recommend that she gets released from prison on parole. And then the very final person that will be looking this over and will decide whether or not Stephanie Lazarus gets released on parole in 2024 or whatever before that earliest release date of 2039 will be the governor of California, who currently is Governor Gavin Newsom. Okay? He will be the one to decide and give the final approval or denial for Stephanie Lazarus on whether or not she will be able to be released from prison on parole, which, I mean, I think you guys know how I feel, but just so I can be clear, fuck no. Stephanie should not be let out on parole. She is a disgusting example of somebody who didn't have respect for their own badge, didn't have respect for the oath that they took, and murdered another person. She kept quiet about it for decades. What makes you think that she's safe to be around people? She's only 63. So, I mean, I'm sure she could probably still do a murder. I mean, she was taught to shoot at center mass. You know, she's got the training. Even though she has been in prison and everything, that training is still there. She was an officer for 23 years, I think, over 2 decades. So it's there. She's too dangerous. I really hope that the right decision is made here. And then, just how insulting must that be to the family? I am so sad for them. They shouldn't even have to be going through this yet. They shouldn't have to go through this until 2039. It's gross. The whole thing is gross. And, I don't know. I really hope that the right decision is made. To Stephanie, all the worst vibes your way. I really think it's fucked up how exactly lucky Stephanie has gotten. I mean, she's gotten everything that she's wanted. Yeah, she finally got caught for the murder of Sherri, but she got to live all those years free, doing whatever she wanted, while Sherri didn't. She got to visit with family. She got to have a fulfilling life. She got to grow in her career and supposedly try to give good back to the community. I think you guys know my opinion is she's trash and she never actually did, but whatever. But Sherri got none of that. Sherri didn't even have a chance. And then everything was lied about for decades. So Stephanie got all the luck. She even got that retirement and just all the worst vibes to her. Stephanie, I hope you stay behind fucking bars and exactly where you belong, where you can no longer do hurt to anybody else. Well, I guess that's really it for the story. Thank you for coming by. I really appreciate it. I know this one I had some feelings about, but I think you guys can understand because I think most people, if they knew all the details, when they learn all the details, they have some feelings about it too. So I will see you guys next time. Make sure that you're kind to other people and, set up the boundaries that you need and, take care of yourself. I'll see you later.